Welcome to our podcast for the Hacking Games. I'm Fergus Hay, the CEO and co-founder of the Hacking Games. And we're going to spend the next 45 minutes talking about how kids and the young generation are falling into cybercrime and what we can do about it. At the Hacking Games, we are committed to creating a generation of ethical hackers to make the world safer. And the reason why we're doing that is that by 2027, the world will lose $23.8 trillion in a single year to cybercrime. That's the GDP of the US. But the really scary thing about that is that 80% of New York teenagers have hacked someone by the age of 16. So we have a young generation who are falling into cyber criminal behaviors through hacking and through particularly gaming platforms. And that means that we're facing a generation who could either be an asset or a liability. And what we're trying to do is inspire that generation to want to be ethical hackers, to come together, to use their creativity and access to technology to make the world safer. So we're really, really delighted to announce our first member and partner of our community, Virtuous. Virtuous is the Virtue operating system. It's our cybersecurity and technology partners who are committed to the same mission. And our anchor founding partner is Sophos. And that's why I'm so delighted today to have Chet Wisniewski, the field CTO of Sophos, to be with me today to talk about the issue and also talk about our partnership. So Chet, thanks so much for coming today. It's really, really awesome to have you here.
No, it's great to be here.
Did I get it right, by the way?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
We practiced the name like 3 times.
We didn't have time to teach you the entire Polish phonetic alphabet, but we're off to a good start, Fergus.
That's true. I'll try. So, Chet, I read a quote from you, which I just validated was definitely from you, that went as such: young people who are curious about hacking should be encouraged to explore cybersecurity in a structured and ethical manner. With the right guidance, their skills can be used to protect rather than to harm. So first of all, did you say that to make sure I get it right?
Yeah, it sounds pretty much like something I said. I do a lot of media interviews, so I don't always recall everything, but I've been known to share that opinion because I think it's important. And I think most people start out their cybersecurity careers when they're young. They don't know it at the time, of course. We grow into that later in our lives as we mature. But clearly, as the stats you were quoting, there's a lot of challenges out there. Mostly, I think, with starts out with things like password theft and these types of things. But that can very easily go the wrong way. And we're seeing more and more criminal organizations and others preying on young people to use them in some of their crimes. And I think some of that is to take advantage of the fact that maybe they won't be prosecuted and go to jail if they're caught early on, especially for a first offense, these types of things, and then get somebody else to do their dirty work so they don't get caught and go to jail.
So that's really interesting you say that. So you've obviously seen this happen over the years, because in your position as, in a corporate entity where you've got, a corporate life to lead, you've got an eye and an ear to what's happening to the younger generation and what their needs are. So talk to me a bit about what gets your attention for that.
Well, I mean, we're just seeing how sophisticated kids are with the technology to start with. They're generally more than their parents, which makes it hard for observation to necessarily know what they're up to when they're using their devices. We're all carrying an incredibly powerful supercomputer in our pocket that enables some of this. And kids are inherently curious and want to know how things work and are interested in trying to break the rules and get around them and make them do things. And that's the part I was talking about with the encouraging. Like, we should encourage this, like creativity and exploration and understanding how things work so that you can maybe manipulate them is good. But of course, we're also seeing the criminal element of this happening primarily, I think, largely a lot of it on the social engineering side. Yeah. Like, teenagers are incredibly good at manipulating people. And when they apply that to social engineering their way into breaking into an enterprise, now it's turned into a felony, and that's a bit of a problem.
So let's take that a little bit. So not that I'm implying that you ever manipulated, but talk to me a bit about your own childhood. Like, how did you fall into the world of computers and the world of software and technology? What was your journey into it?
Well, I started out pretty young. I mean, I'm old, but at the time, I had some early Commodore computers, a Commodore PET and a Commodore 64.
Yeah,
and
great.
So I think I probably got my first computer in 1980, 81, something like that. I was maybe 6 years old.
And were your parents into it?
Not at all. They just thought it was a great thing for me to learn because the future looked like technology was going to be important. And in fact, I was raised Catholic, and I had my first communion money. So I must have been 7 years old, because I think when you're 7 is when you get your first communion in Catholic faith.
It's a good reason for it.
Yeah, and I had like $300, which was a heck of a lot of money in 1980 or 81 or whatever it was, and I bought a used computer, and of course back then we didn't really know of piracy. It wasn't really a concept. If you wanted software, everybody just copied it and shared it, and that kind of thing. So
And which part of America were you in at that time?
So yeah, I mean, I'm Canadian now, but at the time I grew up in Michigan in a really rural area on a farm, and so I spent a lot of time on that computer because if I was outside, I would have to bale hay or work with. It was better to be on the computer, and but it was very rural. I didn't have any friends in my neighborhood. You went miles before the next kid, right? There were miles between bus stops, right?
So how were you learning though? I mean, so it wasn't like you were interconnected on a network at that point.
No, and it's really hard to learn in that environment. You type in programs out of magazine to learn how to start programming, because that's how we did things back then. You had Dr. Dobbs Journal and all these magazines and things that would have programs printed in them, and you'd type them in. So I did a bit of that, but what really changed everything is when we started networking things. And of course, modern networking looks nothing, I'm talking about modems and BBSs and bulletin board systems. Yeah. So, I did get an early acoustic coupler modem for my Commodore that allowed me to dial into some local BBSs from around the area, and that connected me with other humans. So now you can start talking, right? Like you can start engaging with people that are much more sophisticated than you at using it and learning things, right?
And were you an outlier doing that? Like in your rural community, were there any other kids who had a similar interests or mindsets?
Not much. I mean, it was really the freaks and geeks kind of thing, like you would see in the television show, perhaps. We were the nerds at school that everybody picked on and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't cool in any way. No. And it wasn't very, I mean, I maybe knew 5 or 6 people that, had a computer with a modem, but that was really quite rare. Yeah.
And so what did it feel like when you connected to an online community that was a tribe, like people that you could relate to?
Oh, it was great, right? Because I didn't have any kids to play with around nearby or anything. Yeah. It was my community. I made a real connection with folks, right? And started occasionally meeting in person to swap diskettes to get programs for the computer. It's like, oh, everybody's getting together Friday night in the local town over down the street, and we're going to get beers and coffees or whatever. So as kids obviously didn't have drinks, but we'd meet up with all the other computer enthusiasts in town, and and share things, and I think that's. That connectedness is a lot of the appeal of it, right? It was like, it wasn't just learning new things to do with the computer. It was having a shared hobby, like any other hobby, I guess, that you'd practice.
And what was when you think about the community, the people you were chatting with, the people you found your tribe, what was the shared mindset? Like, what was it that you guys all shared as an interest? Or was it an approach to problems? Was it a desire to test things? Was it experimentation?
I think for most people, it was just to get more new programs that they could play with on their computers, right? I mean, there were obviously there's obviously a handful of folks that are always interested in doing more exploration and learning, but the majority were probably just mostly interested in the social interaction of meeting friends and the trading, or now will probably pirating, of software.
Yeah. And mom and dad, how did they react to kind of their son being inside and not bailing hail?
Yeah, my dad, didn't really understand what the time was being wasted on, but because they didn't understand it, I think they must have justified it themselves to some degree. There must be good in this. Yeah. And I think it was, by the mid 80s, it was quite clear that computing was going to change the world, and nobody imagined that it was ever going to be what we have today, and the internet and phones in our pockets and all this kind of stuff. But like, the signs were starting to be there that understanding this stuff was going to be important to having a modern career by the time I was going to be an adult. Yeah. The grocery stores switched from cash registers to computers that had scanners that read barcodes, and everything somewhere, we got rid of elevator men that had to run the elevators, and you could just push buttons, but computers ran that, and everybody knew everything was being computerized. Computers are being added to everything. And so it was quite obvious that understanding this stuff would be important for my future as a professional.
So I was listening to an interview Bill Gates did with Leaders, which is a very famous podcast in Europe, and with Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell. And he talked about the fact that his moment was when someone mentored him, and he was a teenager, and he got like an internship working at a software development house and with these badass programmers giving him a hard time. But that was his chimney moment, pulled him up the chimney and opened his eyes and he started to excel. Did you have an experience like that in your life? Or how is it that you got from the rural community to here effectively?
Well, there was a point once I was already an adult and already working in technology that I had a one of these aha moments. It wasn't the security one necessarily, but it was the one that certainly contributed to me to start gaining some success and accelerating in a direction. And I was working at I guess what we would now call like a network integrator or this kind of thing where, a company that local companies hired to come in and install computers for them, install networks for them, install servers for them, this kind of stuff. And I was working there doing some basic installation services, and I looked into a room and there was a guy in there who was doing what I guess, I don't think we called it that then, and now it's a sales engineering job, which is in essence the technical person matched up with a salesperson to help solve the problem for the customer so that they'll buy your solution. So he's on the phone listening to the customer, talking about all their problems that they have in their business and going, can you come up with design a solution for us, give us a quote that we can then hire your company to come and do this thing for us. I'm like, what's that guy doing? Right? Like, that sounds like fun. Like lifting stuff.
How old were you then?
Oh, this was it's probably 20, 21, something like that. And I'm just like, oh, yeah, like configuring all this stuff is fun-ish, but like I want to solve problems. Yeah, like I want to hear somebody that can't figure out how to get their problems to go away and come in and get all these cool toys and figure out what combination of them, what order to put them together to solve a problem for somebody. Like this sounds like a lot of fun, right? Yeah. And later in my career, that helped me pivot into doing that role in security roles, which ultimately led to where I'm at now. But the security pivot itself was more back in the 80s when I was still learning about phone phreaking and all these kinds of things, and trying to extend my network further and further to learn more and more, and started realizing I can break into any of these computers because there's no security on anything. Right. And a lot of the people I was associating with were breaking in them and probably doing criminal things in a lot of cases.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So when did you notice that members of the community were using their skills for insidious or nefarious?
I was probably 12 or 13 years old. Okay. And, because I lived in a rural area, our phone system was very antique. It was installed in the 1930s. And so blue boxing, which is taking over a telephone line with a 2600 hertz tone. People may have heard of 2600 magazine is named for the blue box. I learned about that and figured out, I can make free phone calls from the payphone at school with this cool box I bought at Radio Shack and modified, and kind of got me a little bit into the hacking community. And I wanted to learn what all these people were doing. Like, if I can do this to a telephone, what else can we do?
Yeah,
what other tricks are there that nobody knows about that we can learn and unravel?
And that's the creativity, isn't it? That's the creativity of the human mind at a young age that wants to test boundaries and see what they can kind of break and create. And that's a powerful spirit.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, in essence, you're sort of, if you've ever seen the TV show MacGyver, MacGyver was a verb for a while. People say, I MacGyvered something. But it's literally like, what does MacGyver do? He takes a bunch of things and uses them for an unintended purpose. Yeah. Takes something that was designed to do one thing and turns it and puts it together with something else and makes it do something it was never meant to do. Yeah. And that's exactly what hacking is, right? Like, you're clearly... The people who designed the phone network didn't intend for me to be able to play a magic noise down the line and to make free phone calls. But that's an unintended use of both the thing that made the noise and the telephone.
What we believe is that we can inspire this kid. Gen Z is 25% of the global workforce, 12 to 27 years old, to say, look, with these mindset that you just described, the perfect definition of that, the MacGyver mindset, you can either be nefarious and cause harm, or you can use your creativity and access to technology to do amazing things. And the examples that we tend to reference are Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. Right? Bill Gates actually got arrested at 12 years old for you doing exactly what you did, which was hack into a phone line and steal phone credit. And he was actually banned from access to phones or something like that for a year.
Well, and I think Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak built blue boxes and were selling them on the street to let other people make free phone calls.
Yeah, right. And actually, the more polished version of that story.
And I'm only mildly younger than them. I'm younger than them, I assure you. But I am getting up in years, but I'm not quite as old as Steve and Steve.
But also with the two Steves is they actually got the seed capital for Apple by being paid by companies to hack their phone lines to see if they were vulnerable, pen testing. And that's, so here are two examples of young, great minds had creativity and access to technology. And then they were dabbling, but then they chose to do something. Like you have chosen to make the world safer, right? Do your bit to contribute to making the world more secure. And that feels to us like an ethical fork in the road, right? There's a fork in the road that Chet, when he was 12 years old, he saw other people in the community who were doing bad stuff. And you decided to do good stuff. But for every one of you, there's 9 others who went down the wrong path, and now it's 1,000 others. So what is it that you saw when you were 12? Like, what did you see people doing, and why did you not follow as a sheep?
Well, the main thing was, so if you weren't on an old phone system that you could do these things to make free phone calls, the other way was to steal people's credit cards and trade those credit cards to other people so you could make phone calls with credit cards or prepaid phone cards.
Manually steal their credit cards? Like,
I don't know how they were getting them, to be honest. What I just noticed is the areas where I was hanging out, where we would share information about how different computers worked and how you logged into different early Unix systems that we might be able to dial into. They had a modem sitting unsecured that you could dial into without a password, or, we would share notes on, well, once you get on one of these computers, how do you use it? It doesn't work like your Apple or your Commodore at home. There's different commands. It's a completely foreign beast, and none of us had been to school or university that could teach us any of those things. So we would trade notes like, wow, when you get on this kind of, here's a way to figure out what kind of mainframe it is that you logged into, or that you dialed into with your modem. And once you're on there, here's some commands you can type to get like listings of things that might be on there, or bring up menus, or do different things to start figuring out how they work. And it was just it was a digital version of urban exploration, right? And in those same forums, people started trading stolen credit card numbers and other things like this, because that would allow them to dial long distance into these systems. And I'm like, this isn't right.
So that's interesting. So do you feel like they...
I mean, I should have realized making free phone calls with the noise wasn't right either. Yeah. But I think it was the personalization of the victims. There's a human being that this credit card belongs to that's going to get themselves an $8,000 bill. That felt different than making a $3 phone call that AT&T never got to record the billing information for.
Sure. And so what I think I heard you say there was that...
And I'm not justifying the phone freaking, don't get me wrong at this point in my life. But that's, that's where I was at.
But what I heard you say there was that some of the people were using the stolen credit card in order to get access phone lines in order to do more with their computers.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah, absolutely.
It wasn't like getting the money was the end goal.
No, they weren't buying stuff largely with them.
That's interesting.
And they were almost a currency of their own. There were a lot of people who, that was an ethical boundary they wouldn't cross either, but they were in that gray zone. They would use them to trade for other things. So they wanted access to some information and somebody was hoarding it, and they go, well, I'll give you a credit card number. They wouldn't themselves ever abuse the credit card that was stolen. And I, based on my memory's funny. This was 40 years ago, almost 40 years ago. So I don't remember all the details, but I think at the time I was figuring that a lot of these cards were being stolen by, teenagers working at shops and malls. And back in those days, we made carbon copies of the zip-zap machines of credit cards, right? So we didn't use digital equipment to use a credit card, so it was very easy to steal all the carbon receipts that were in the trash at the end of the day. Amazing. And see all the numbers on them, right?
Yeah, incredible. So there is a pathway there, isn't it, of people facing an ethical fork in the road, and you chose the right path. And what did you then do to satiate your desire to experiment and explore and test, but keep it on the legal side? Like where did that take you?
Yeah, well, I mean, so, back to the phone network for a second, but like at the time, the phone network was the largest computer network in the world. It was the most complicated computer that was ever built. So that was why it was fun to play with, because it was this amazing computer that everybody had access to from their own house. And then eventually I pivoted to the early internet in probably we probably didn't call it the internet. Probably still have been ARPANET. 1986, 87. In my area of Michigan, is one of the founding universities of the actual internet ARPANET system. University of Michigan is on one of the main original spokes. And so I heard from my hacker friends, like if you can get a free account at the university on their Unix systems, and if you can dial in there, you can access other computers all over the country.
Yeah, wow. So that just felt like reckless abandon. What an amazing opportunity to go and do that.
Exactly. And that's around the time that I think I pivoted on to thinking that there's a future in the security thing, right?
How old are you at this point? So, like teens?
13.
Yeah, okay. So young though, wow.
Yeah, but a lot of time on my hands. Come home after school, both my parents work. I got nothing to do but screw around with the computer. We quit farming by then.
Yeah.
Like, there was nothing to do but sit around and watch television or mess with the computer, right? Yeah. And so I started logging into the university and exploring the early internet, and so many of the systems had no passwords, or they were all stupidly guessable. They were the name of the university, or they were, it was just all this kind of, login J Smith, password J Smith, like just unbelievable nonsense. And that was the point. I'm like, if more and more people keep accessing this is going to end in tears. Yeah, like this is untenable that these systems are this open and accessible. Yeah. What would I do if I put my system online to lock it down? How would I stop people from getting into my system? Yeah. And this is right around the time that the Morris worm, the very first computer worm, hit and showed how vulnerable systems with bugs in them could be, and that kind of thing. But it would be another 10 years before I could genuinely turn that into work, because no one cared, because hardly anyone was on the internet, and it was all academia, and really only the .mil network cared about security. Sure. Everybody else, it was just like, academics built the internet, and of course, the mindset of academia is information should be free. Right. Why would I secure my computer? If somebody wants to read my research, they should have access to it.
The internet was never built for security. No. I mean, that's why it's always a chase game. So, but it sounds like, so you didn't go to conventional university system or college system.
No, I was a grade 8 dropout.
Okay. So, and the industry doesn't normally provide pathways for people like that. So talk to us a bit about your pathway, because I think that's going to be particularly relevant to this generation, who probably a lot of them will not go to university.
Yeah, I mean, I can't recommend dropping out of high school, and I wouldn't discourage anyone from attending university. And I'm seeing a theme here in that all your heroes you've referenced so far in this entry to the podcast is that no one's completed university.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, I haven't even got to my mother yet.
I'm not suggesting that this well-worn path is necessarily the correct path. But I mean, for me, it was just hard work and kind of waiting for the world to catch up. I mean, when I quit school, I left home when I was 16 and went off on my own and just started working, but not in anything related to what I do now. I mean, it wasn't anything that prepared me any better to do the work I do today, other than just you're responsible for yourself and you work hard and
gotta eat.
Eat. Yeah. I mean, I worked at an auto paint store and I sold printer cartridges door to door, and I did some crazy things just to get by. Right. And then, while doing that, started a side business doing computer consulting work, because I was always obsessed with technology and continued to be so, and kept working on the side until I was making enough money to quit the goofy jobs and just work doing technology work. And then, as I mentioned, kind of pivoted toward sales engineering and more consulting design kind of roles that I really enjoyed. But again, everybody always knew that I knew how to take things apart and figure out how they worked, and was still focused on all the security and following all the early hacking scene with, Cult of the Dead Cow and on all the things that were happening in those exciting early years of security when everything was breakable and there was a whole, with everything being interconnected on the internet, suddenly anyone could break it. Yeah. And so I did a lot of side things, right? People would hire me to do what we'd now call a penetration test for their business, because they knew I was good at this kind of stuff and that kind of thing. So that prepared me well for the pivot into full-time work within the industry.
What happened to the community that you were hanging around with when you were 12 to 13? Did you keep in touch with them? Did you?
When they started getting arrested, I went to ground and never talked to any of them ever again. Yeah, yeah. There was an FBI raid in the late 80s called Operation Sun Devil. And hundreds of people around the country were all arrested during that, some of which I knew. Yeah. And I was like, yep, done with that. Never going near any of that ever again. Yeah. Don't want that.
You referenced...
so people ask if those things work. Like, is law enforcement effective? In a way, when these things happen, it can be. And we've seen similar things with some kids in the UK, probably not too far from you, in Oxford and other places that were involved in this scattered spider group and other things. And maybe when you hear that the NCSC and the Serious Crime Agency is picking up some people it might make you choose the other path.
Well, that's actually part of what we're doing at the Hacking Games. So we're working with various law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, as well as Interpol and Intercop, to look at a criminal pathway. And the criminal pathway is kids going online and just using the internet, to then kids going to online gaming, and then from online gaming to cheat code usage, to then hacking forums, to then light hacking, then serious hacking, and then serious crime. And in that criminal pathway, there are potential off-ramps at every stage. Mm-hmm. And so what we're working with law enforcement agencies is they're really good at the moment of misdemeanor. So once there's a crime, they're gearing up and they'll catch people and they'll arrest people or cease and desist or rehab or whatever. And what we're going to help bit is on the prevent bit. How do we kind of prevent kids from falling into the wrong path? So you self-corrected, right? Not that you self-managed it. You sat there and said, well, I don't agree with this credit card stuff. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go this way. But for every one of you, there's 9 who are not. And actually, the reference I always give is, if my son walks into school and punches someone in the face and steals their money, he knows that's wrong because there's a social contract. Yeah. Right. The social contract is my wife and I have told him you can't do that. The village, the community enforces it, and then government and law enforcement enforce it. And of course, he sees the blood running down the kid's nose. It takes a lot to do that. But in the digital world, not one of those 3 pillars exists. Mum and dad don't have a clue what their kids are doing online. Secondarily, the online community is encouraging each other, not discouraging each other.
Yeah. And that happens in the physical punching too, I think. When the kids are in the schoolyard behind the school.
That's also, get him. Yeah, exactly.
But the same thing does happen digitally, but it's at a scale that's unrivaled, and the anonymity makes it fiercer and meaner. Yeah. When it's people you react very differently to it than this digital stranger thing. It's a lot easier to be cruel.
Well, Marcus Hutchins, who's part of our Virtue community, he was explaining it to me. He said, look, when he designed malware and it was being used by criminal gangs, he knew it was. And he was young, he was 13 or 14. He didn't really take responsibility for it until there was a QA problem. And what happened was they came to him and they said, look, your malware is not working. Can you just go in and fix it? So he goes into the use case in the QA line and he saw it was in someone's pension account and they were about to take the money. And that's when he felt the end result. Yeah. And that was his kind of ethical fork in the road moment.
Somehow that made it real.
Yeah, right. And that's what's a great danger, because these young kids, it's an extension of their gamified experience. They get recruited from gaming platforms. We know that. That's what law enforcement have helped us understand. And then what they're doing online is an extension of that, and they don't see the bleeding nose. They don't see the mental health pain of someone losing their life savings. They don't see the suicide rates of the sextortion stuff. And out of the back of that, they don't feel the responsibility for it. And that's also a great opportunity for us to make a difference to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, that it being a victim is even more important than understanding there's victims, right? Like it being a unique human being that you can in some way relate to, that is like a parent or a cousin or whatever, makes it real. Yeah.
So what's changed? I mean, what's changed between the community that you grew up seeing and then you saw them go down the dark path to now? Like, what do you see as the differences?
Well, I mean, what's being classified as a hack is a difficult thing to digest sometimes, because with the numbers you're quoting, most of that to us old schoolers is not really hacking.
Yeah.
But I get why it's lumped together, and I'm not going to enter the waters of good and bad hack in the podcast. But I think it's important to differentiate some of that to a degree as well, because obviously we want to deter anything criminal, no matter skilled or unskilled. But I think maybe the pathways are very different as far as whether it's really a career for you or not, based on the skill levels involved. And obviously a lot of this social engineering stuff that's been going on, most of the things we've heard about, specifically for major crimes that have been involving teenagers recently, have all been mostly social engineering related.
Does it matter? Does it matter if it's technical or non-technical?
Well, career-wise it can, because there are very different places that you can demonstrate to someone where they could use it well.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're really good at social engineering, that's a skill that is often a very valuable skill for penetration testers. And a lot of companies want people to do that legitimately for them. And that's a very different thing than if you're really good at hacking video games to get unlimited lives. That might lead you into doing malware analysis and vulnerability discovery. There's different paths for different talents that someone might have. So I think I don't think that is true for way back in the day when I was starting. Everything was purely pretty hardcore technical back then. But these days, there's a lot of different skills being misused, perhaps. But most of them have a parallel, bizarro version of them on the good side that mirrors it, but they're different paths that would be maybe of interest to somebody that you're trying to steer.
Like this innate human creativity and talent has never had so much jet fuel as it has right now. And if you think about that, I love that way you describe the hacking mindset, the MacGyver mindset. In a way, that's kind of why we don't ride horses to work anymore, and we don't read by candlelight, and we don't heat ourselves by coal. It's that sense of creative innovation. And now you have that native creative innovation multiplied by the access to technology to do things really fast and at scale, and to experiment and to test things and innovate. And that should be an amazing opportunity for this generation to say, wow, I can achieve so much more now than I could have ever done. And I like the way you describe it of saying, look, there are innate behaviors that people are doing as youngsters in their digital lives that can be channeled to be put to real world use in a constructive way.
And often it's purely for there's maybe two things driving it. I'm not an expert in teenage psychology, but
I don't think that exists. The expert.
I think one of them is the art of exploration. And if there's nothing legal and safe for me to explore, I'll just do it on things I'm not supposed to do it on.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there's also the thrill of beating people at things. And that's harder to address than the first one.
Yeah.
Like, I think the boredom and exploration would more have described myself if I were growing up these days and I had access to what we have access to now. I was never trying to do anything to benefit myself.
Sure.
And I would never do anything if I thought it would ever harm someone else.
Yeah.
Those were my lines.
Yeah.
And anything I ever did that might not have been legal in getting into systems was done purely out of curiosity.
Yeah.
And then after I satiated my curiosity, I left and moved on.
Yeah.
Leaving no harm, leave no footprints.
Yeah. Yeah. Leave no footprints. Don't get caught.
And don't leave any fingerprints either. But that were there channels available to me to allow me to do that benefited someone, I would have been right there, the first in line to do it. And I'm starting to see something. I work with some university classes where I live in British Columbia, and I'm invited to work with students on projects usually every year. And one of the options the students have for a research project in the security class is they can volunteer to do a penetration test for a local technology company building phone apps or this kind of thing. And the kids always flock to it. Like, I mean, they're adults at this point. They're university students. They're, 19, 20 years old, most of them. But like, there's like, oh, wow, how cool. Like, we get to break into a real cloud system, a real app, break apart a real protocol. But the end result of it is going to be making this thing more secure and helping this company. And then we get a grade out of it that propels our career. And when we go to shop ourselves out as security people, when we graduate, we've got this experience that we can share.
But that's what you referenced in your quote at the top of the show, right? Where, you said if you can give them the opportunities and channel the energies. And it's what Chris Weissapol said. Chris is on our advisory board and he's a founding member of Loft and founder of Veracode. He said, look, I only thought there was an illegal way until someone showed me there was a legal way.
Right.
And then someone explained that I could get paid from doing my hobby. I was like, this is great. This is like digital Disneyland. Let's go.
It's exactly that, right? And at least at the moment, cybersecurity jobs pay pretty well.
Yeah, well, exactly. So let's talk a bit about that. Talk to me about the state of talent in security right now, because the data that we've seen is that there are 5.5 million people working in security globally at the moment. There are 4 million unfilled jobs. That's forecasted to be 12 million by 2027.
Yeah, I think that I blame the industry a lot for this. There are certainly shortages, especially in certain specialties, and I don't think there's any real doubt about that. And we need to do more to invite more people in. But I think the reason we're so short is we're not opening the door wide enough.
Right.
I don't think have a deep shortage of people who like to deeply tear apart software and look for bugs and that kind of thing so much, as we're lacking people who understand the social things that need to go into designing security tools and systems so that they're usable to people.
Explain that a bit to me.
Well, I think when we pre-interviewed, we talked a little bit. I think I had a little rant about the web browser and the error messages that can pop up. So I'll use that one again because it's a pet peeve of mine that we finally got rid of the padlock because nobody knew what to make of the padlock other than apparently websites weren't safe if they didn't have a padlock, which is just weird. Yeah. And I guess we encrypted the internet, so we don't need the padlock anymore. So now instead we get error messages telling us that the 256-bit AES key has expired. And it may be unsafe to proceed to www.sundrygoods.org. And would you like to continue? And I'm like, okay, who knows what that means?
Yeah.
That was written by somebody in security with well intentions, give you all the information necessary to know why you broke your website, maybe. Should go to the admin, not the user.
Yeah.
And it's not something, if it's something unsafe, why am I allowed to proceed?
Yeah.
Just don't let me do it if it's not safe.
Well, I mean, like we were talking earlier, it's like driving on a mountain road and you have the sign of like boulders falling down. It's like beware of boulders falling down. It's like 2 boulders falling down the side of the mountain. And instead they would have like a breakdown of the Teutonic geographical plates with an analysis of all the chemicals and physiological
and
attributes.
Statistical probability that it might happen.
Yeah, exactly. Like no one's going to drive fast and watch
with 4 decimal points.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, and this is the thing, right? And so like we need people who understand how to communicate messages. We need people who know how to design systems that are usable. And a lot of this is a diversity issue, and of all kinds, racial diversity, gender diversity. We have a very monoculture in the industry, and if we hired more accountants and psychologists and people from other things that are interested in security and want to be a part of it and mentor them, they can bring their own experiences from their other parts of their lives to bear to make all these things better.
But I honestly think we're at an incredible tipping point because, I'm not from the security industry. And my experience over the last year and a half has been that I feel like it's going to go through what investment banking went through in the 70s, which is that in the 50s, banking was populated by clerks, quite humdrum, run-of-the-mill. It was not an aspirational world to be in. But by the 70s, people were like, wow, post-war recovery, globalization, America is driving the global economy. This Wall Street thing, this investment banking thing seems to going to be where I can make a load of money, I can be really influential, I can direct government policy, and it's going to make the world go round. So all the great talent went there, not just the mathematicians, but the strategists, the managers, the directors, the salespeople, the people who wanted to be the best in HR would go there, or the people who were best in accounting would go there, because that's where it attracted the greatest talent. The same was in tech in 2000s. It's the same with AI now. And I think security is the next wave, because security has delighted in being in the niche for so long. It's had these barriers of access, language and culture and community. And now the problem is in the mass. Right? You can just see $23.8 trillion to be lost to cybercrime. It is a mass problem. And even my parents, after the CrowdStrike Microsoft challenge, even my parents know what that is now. So it is in the mass. And what that means is the talent requirement is going to be more T-shaped than what it is right now, which feels like a L shape right now. And that is a huge opportunity, particularly with Gen Z, who are natively messing about and being curious anyway.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful opportunity for the industry.
Yeah, and I think, I blame HR departments for a lot of the shortage because I look at job requirements frequently. I help a lot of people with their CVs and resumes, and you look at this laundry list of requirements for a security job, and I'm going, I'm not qualified for that, and I'm 3 levels above that.
Well, what's driving that? So what's happening?
And we need to make it clear that, like, this is more of a choose-your-own-adventure, right? Like, we're looking for people with all these skills. If you have 4 of the 12, you should apply.
Yeah.
Don't let the other 8 scare you away. We need to be more open to mentorship and guiding people down to going, if you've got a good foundation in here by having a subset of these, come join us.
How
and
have we
we'll help
ended
you
up
with
there?
the rest of it.
How have we ended up there? How have we ended up with these restrictions?
I think part of it is that our industry is deeply technical, and the people who are driving the human resources departments don't understand it very well, and we're not explaining it to them very well, so they're just compiling these lists.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody means to be doing it wrong. I mean, I've had this conversation with our own job postings on occasion. I've gone to the hiring manager and went, did you just list off all the technologies that your team uses? And they're like, yeah, I asked HR to post that job. And I'm like, they put them all down as a requirement? But people that are confident in themselves, and often that ends up being white males, all aren't afraid of that, and they apply. And then a lot of people that are less confident don't apply. Yeah. And so we're weeding out a whole bunch of amazingly talented people that we probably would hire. Yeah. But we've intimidated them with this tech dictionary of things that they should do. And I don't know how to fix it. I'm not a human resources professional. I think one way to fix it might be to make it clear in postings that these are desirable skills, so that people understand that, that sounds like the job I want, and I have some of it. Maybe I should give it a go. I mean, we need to just encourage people more.
So we work pretty closely with a bunch of American government entities and European ones. And it is so incredibly consistent. Number one mission is talent. And if that is in the security side, it's because we're in a foot race against China for defense. And if it's in the private sector, it's we need to secure ourselves against, our own attacks. And but the barrier I also hear is, but we need minimum 2 years experience. We need all of those things. So how do we leap that gap? Because it looks like the White House have set an example. They passed a law, I believe, like 6 months ago, just before RSAC, saying that you didn't need a university degree to work in security in the White House. So that sounds like and the Italians have a saying, the fish rots from the head first. So if the head is healthy, the body is healthy. So that sounds like a good start. But why are we in this situation of the industry not investing in young talent, and what can we do to fix it?
Yeah, I just think it needs to be a lot more mentorship programs, in my opinion, because almost everybody I've had the opportunity to introduce to one of these, I guess, security is not a thing anymore. It's like 11 things or 12 things, or there's probably 30 variation. I mean, you could be a forensic investigator, you could be this, you can be that. There's a million different paths, right? But when you introduce somebody to the paths with a helping hand and get them started, the enthusiasm carries them through and they're fine. And if they've got good oversight of somebody to check in on them and guide them along the path, they'll naturally gain the experience that you were demanding that they have when they came in the door within 6 months anyway. Yeah. You just have to be willing to mentor them. And I think part of the problem has been in this mad rush to hire. None of us have time to mentor anybody because we're drowning. Right. So I don't sign up to I need you to hire a skilled person because we're already drowning. I don't have time to slow myself down to go mentor somebody and then wait for them to come up. Yeah. And we have to figure out how to fix that. I don't know what the answer to that problem is. And maybe it's more partnerships with associate's degree granting schools like community colleges and things where we can get real world experience where they're helping out the team without slowing you down too much to get them mentored enough that they then have that experience to stand on their own. I mean, maybe that's an approach we can take. But I really feel mentorship is the way, and that formally structured things don't serve our industry terribly well because it's so fast-paced. If you finish a 4-year degree, what you learned in the first year is already not relevant by the time you graduate. The fundamentals are always true, which is the beautiful system that the schools can fill. If you look at a program, I mean, like one of the best programs in the world is at Purdue University. Their Sirius program, it's amazing. Founded by Gene Spafford, or Spaff as everybody calls him, and they just got a phenomenal program there. But what are they teaching? Well, they've got all sorts of cybersecurity disciplines within the program, but it all starts out with hardcore on the fundamentals of how the computers work, how the networks work, because you can't break them if you don't know how they work. Yeah. And that's what we're doing. Even if you're defending them, you need to know how they're broken so that you can fix them. Yeah. And is the talent profile changing? Is the talent profile changing? When you look at the young talent that are coming into the industry, are they a different mindset? Are they approaching problems in a different way? Do you see a generational shift? There's certainly a big gap between, say, someone who's coming in at 25 and somebody like myself that's pushing 50, because those of us that are at my age actually watched the entire internet develop.
Yeah.
and got to experience it in slow motion as it was built.
Yeah.
Which means we understand every nook and cranny of how all the protocols work and how all the things work. Whereas somebody who's in their 20s today, the network was just there and you just used it every day. It was in your phone. You never had to know how it worked.
Yeah.
And that means they're missing a lot of the fundamentals of the structure of how the real meat of how these things work. And for many of the disciplines within security, you really need to understand the hardcore fundamentals. And those skills aren't there. And I think that's, to me, what I would like to see in more university programs is anybody that's teaching computer science should have a mandatory 2 or 3 classes of security as part of a computer science program, because nobody should be writing software without considering security while they're building it. And then on the flip side, anybody in a security program should be getting hardcore fundamentals on how computers and CPUs and memory works and how networks actually work and how packets are moved around and addressed and all these things, because that is an essential thing to really comprehend most of the attacks that you're going to face in the real world.
Well, you'll be relieved to hear that the solution to getting the hardcore fundamentals absorbed is what I was told the other day, which is we'll now be learning by TikTok. So 15-second reels to get to the real fundamental deep dives into the complex issues. So the future's safe, I think.
The same place I learned that apparently sunscreen is cancerous and I should make my own.
Did it tell you how to make your own?
Yeah, oh yeah, they'll give you a recipe and everything.
Really,
and
by some influencer.
It's a quick way to get cancer for real. So I hope it's better than that. I mean, YouTube is a blessing and a curse for these reasons. I mean, there's an amazing amount of content for somebody to self-educate if they choose to on YouTube. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But there's a whole lot of things telling you how to crime on YouTube as well. And I don't think we need criming guides.
Yeah. No, I mean, that is a searchable internet. Unfortunately, you can find whatever your nose takes you to, and that needs regulation in some way. And I feel like the horse has already bolted, to be honest. I mean, I don't know.
But it's complicated because anything that you're doing to commit a crime, I can do to do a benefit. These are all double-edged swords, right?
Yeah,
and
sure.
It's hard.
No.
Somebody approached me yesterday at Black Hat Security Conference in Las Vegas and said, hey, maybe we should partner with GitHub to block malware from being uploaded to GitHub. And I'm like, they host the malware on purpose right now. Like you can go download backdoors and command and control and all these things. There's a lot of exploits for how to break into Microsoft Exchange servers and all of that's right there on GitHub on purpose, because it's there with the intent to provide it to penetration testers and red teamers and people doing professional security work who want to take these things and twist them to their own needs to test their network security. Unfortunately, you could watch a YouTube video and a teenager will watch that video and use that same tool to commit a crime.
Yeah.
Do we ban it? I don't think we can ban it. And knowledge, unlike weapons, can't, genie's out of the bottle, you can't put it back kind of thing, right? We talk about regulating computer malware and tools like weapons. The Wassenaar Agreement was trying to be used as a method of regulating exploit tools and things like this for a while. And I'm like, this isn't missiles. Like, you can't seize them in the ship halfway across the Arabian Sea and take them away from someone. Once the United States unleashed Stuxnet on Iran 10, 12 years ago, whatever it was now, probably longer. I'm old, I forget. But like once our own government used 50 days to target the Iranians for a very noble purpose, the whole world now had those 50 days to attack my grandma and my uncle and steal their pension. And
it's all in the hands of the beholder, isn't it? I mean,
and there's no taking it away from the people that shouldn't have it. If the good guys have it, the bad guys can have it too. Because hacking and computer ideas it's ideas. You can't control people's thoughts.
So we've covered some really interesting spaces. We've covered like innate creativity. Like exactly that point, the human being desire to innovate and push edges, and that happens at a young age. We've got young kids, and how do you encourage them to express themselves but understand right and wrong? We've got young talent. How do we leap that talent deficit? How do we open up the fissures of the industry? So we look at companies like Sophos, and who are, we're delighted to have them as our kind of founding partner of Virtuous, and they've been an amazing partner to have, and we're doing lots of cool stuff together. But what can companies like Sophos do to make a difference here?
Well, as I was mentioning, I try to get involved with mentoring people as much as I can. I'm involved in a lot of local university programs. I happen to live in Vancouver, British Columbia, so I'm fortunate enough to go down and lecture at the University of Washington or University of San Francisco or University of British Columbia and make friends with those people and help guide them into their careers. I haven't had the opportunity or made the effort necessarily to reach out to the younger generation a little bit than that, but certainly at that level, it's something. And we've got partnerships with universities to do similar things around the world. We do a lot of internships to let people get a start, dipping their toe in the water into the security world to see what they think of it, and across all disciplines, right? People that want to be security salespeople can come be an intern in our sales teams, or in engineering, building our products, or in labs, learning how to investigate malware threats and publish protection against it. And so we do a lot of those kinds of things as well. And, I think, obviously participating in programs like yours is another place that we're looking to do that. And, we all benefit when this talent is directed into protecting us, right? Yeah. And ideally, it's not just serving our own needs and making it easier to recruit new people to come work for us, but it's really with the intent of making the world a safer place, which is really the mission of the business.
It's an enormous problem, and it takes a global digital village to solve it. And we were at the CISA executive lunch, and the head of the Secret Service, American Secret Service, said that, look, guys, please don't think that the US government is going to be the first mover on solving all these problems. Like, you, private sector, you guys are going to get there first, and we will come a little later, probably with some pretty big horsepower. But, we look to you guys to make the difference. And I think that public-private partnership is going to be absolutely essential. And we've been going 12 months, right? The amount of government engagement that has come to the hacking games to say, we see the same problem, you're addressing it in a different way, what help do you need? And I just been so, honestly, as a voter, as a citizen, as a taxpayer, I'm British, obviously, but, I've lived 10 years in America. I'm so encouraged to see that. Like, it feels like there's one common enemy, and we're working with both Google and potentially Microsoft, and they're working together. I love that.
And competitive barriers only exist within sales teams. Like, honestly, we are all on the same mission. I was been talking to journalists all day today as part of my visit here to Black Hat, and that's come up numerous times. I'm just like, well, ultimately, nobody wins if my competitors' customers are hacked.
Yeah, right.
Like, that is not what we want. That is not a positive outcome. We are all working behind the scenes to share everything everywhere as quickly and safely as we can share it, so that's not the thing we're going to compete on. We'll compete on whether our product's easier to use, or whether it's cheaper, or whether it's faster, or we got better tech support, whatever. But the thing we're not going to do is go, well, we want your customers to be ransomwared. Like, that is not the outcome, right? And the government has, the only weapon the government has to bring into this, in my opinion, is its enormous buying power.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy solutions from organizations that do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And if they do that, they can completely transform what every business does, because everybody wants a piece of the government money that's being spent. And it's an easy way for them to do it without regulation, without passing laws telling people what they got to do. Like, here in America in particular, First Amendment rights, business can do whatever they want. But the big carrot is the PO that the government issues when they buy your product. And it's like, oh, well, we need you to have a diverse workforce, and we need you to have a security program that meets certain requirements. And, this kind of thing is a very powerful tool that the government has.
Totally.
And I think up until now, they've wielded it well. The challenge we had before was there was no functional government agency really reaching out and working with the private sector. They made a lot of motions saying they were, and they weren't really until CISA. Yeah. And CISA is just trying so hard and has made so much progress in their 4 or 5 years. Six years now. Yeah. I should have listened to Jen's keynote. Apologies for that. Yeah. But 6 years, but whatever, 6 years is a short amount of time. They've made an enormous amount of progress, and they really mean it this time. The amount of private sector cooperation, I get a reach out from CISA personally 2 or 3 times a week from people at CISA wanting our input, wanting our contributions on threat intelligence, things that they can use to help people. And they're feeding back information, which is the first time that's really happened from the government. They generally take things in and nothing comes out.
Yeah. No, they seem highly mobilized.
CISA's really about, all right, we've got this intelligence we're going to share with you.
Yeah.
They're really working hard at it. And I think that I'm more optimistic now than I've ever been.
I mean, they have a partnerships division. Lena Clark, I know she's just moved on, but, that was their job, was to build partnerships, which I love.
And their people aggressively contact me on Slack.
Yeah, I bet they are. Listen, Chet, this has been awesome. And I'm really happy to have people who've had a journey themselves And because that is how we can relate to Gen Z and help them go, okay, so there are pathways that I can have. So what I'd love to do is, final thing is, I wanted to take you back to Michigan. So you're 13 years old, you're avoiding doing the hail bales. You've got online, on that community, you're seeing two groups of people. You're seeing the kind of ethically self-managing, the Chets of the world, and then you're seeing the guys disappearing down the pathway into stealing credit cards for and hurting other people. What would you say to them now to try to shift their mindset? What would be your kind of Jerry Springer final word?
Well, in that time, I think I did a little bit of this, which was just pointing out to some of the others, like, this is wrong, and I'm leaving, you should come with me. Peer pressure is an amazing thing when you're that age. And some folks, I think, did also perhaps lay down the arms, if you will, or whatever, and move on to other things. And I think that peer pressure is an important element for people that age, because I just don't see many of those kids wanting to listen to a 50-year-old guy ramble on about security stuff.
No.
If they are interested, they could subscribe to my podcast.
Yeah.
But it's just that it's got to come from their own peer group.
Yeah.
And I don't think it takes that much persuasion, to be honest, because I think a lot of this is being no different than the schoolyard fight in the back, being egged on by your friends. And if some of those friends are also counseling you to have some restraint, it probably is going to work in a lot of the cases.
You know what the data shows? 8 out of 10, right? 80% have hacked, which is messing around with the barrier to entry so low. That they're not criminally minded.
No.
So they're not the outliers who are kind of criminally minded. These are just like kids messing about. And with the right intervention and the right correction, which is exactly what you're saying, that influence of peer pressure. So we created a youth community called Cyber, where we have, we think, 4 of the most amazing young ethical hackers under the age of 18. So Beer Sky Labs, she created the Girls Who Hack platform when she was 11. She's now 17. She's actually chairing Next Gen at DEF CON this week, and we're doing a joint event together with the Hacking Games. And then Marco Liberale, who's the ethical hacker out of Saudi Arabia, who did the keynote at Black Hat, Middle East and Africa. He's 13, wrote his first code at 3, his first malware at 5. And Cole Weissapal, who's Chris Weissapal's son, who has like a personal mission to bring down the scam teams based out of India, making people's lives misery.
Which is awesomeness.
Yeah. And then and Dylan, who is just a new entry, and he just won Microsoft's Pen Tester of the Year, or Researcher of the Year. He's 15. He's 15. He hacked into Microsoft when he was 12 during COVID because the school wouldn't let his classmates go onto Teams and talk. And they were all really lonely, and they were having serious like mental health issues. So he just found a backdoor, and then he opened up a way into Teams and allowed them to do it. And he was online for 2.5 weeks, and then Microsoft found out about it, and he got invited in. But these young guys, the way I say to, look, guys, this is yours. The Hacking Games will be yours. When you are ready for it, it is yours to have. You guys need to define the tone of voice and how do we speak. And this code of conduct, the ethical code of conduct, it is 0 point being written by you or me.
Yeah,
it needs to be written by them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they need to own it. And there are moments in my journey in this experience. I'm a parent of 3 kids under 10 years old. Stomach left my body when I sat in a room with 6 hackers for the first time, when I learned how kids are being groomed from gaming platforms. And I went through shock to paranoia. I immediately started looking at what my kids were doing. And then to hope. And then actually to conviction. And I've got total conviction that this is an amazing generation of incredible talent, and that we just need to recognize what's happening, make the right interventions, and create the right environment for that middle of the curve. It's the middle of the curve that drives society and economics. It's never the periphery. So get that middle of the curve to make the right decisions, move in the right way. And then we are going to have a generation with creativity and technology that can unleash amazing innovation. And that's what makes me feel optimistic and convicted. And I think, we need people like you. We need companies like Sophos. We need the US government. We need the Microsofts and the Googles of the world just to, come together as a village and help solve the problem. And that's why we're so grateful to have you on the pod today.
Well, it was great to be here, and it was fun to share my story, and I look forward to continuing to work with your organization.
No more hay bells.
No more. No. You learn the value of hard work. You'll learn that working on a computer is a good deal.
These hands. These hands. No hay bells. Awesome. That was great. Thank you.